The phone didn't just ring, it screamed. I hadn't heard that specific ringtone in 12 years. My sister's voice on the other end wasn't warm. It wasn't welcoming. It was a warning that would keep me away from my own blood for a decade. But today, on my 30th birthday, the truth decided to show up uninvited. The rain in the city always feels heavier when you're lonely. I stood by the window of my small apartment, watching the droplets race down the glass. My name is Lily Rose, and today I am 30 years old. There are no balloons, no cake, no laughter echoing through the hallway. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of a memory I've tried to bury since I was 18. I remember that night like it was yesterday. The air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. I was standing on the porch of my childhood home, my bags packed, ready to come back for the summer break. But the door didn't open. Instead, my sister Sarah stepped out, closing the door firmly behind her. "Don't come home, Lily," she had whispered, her eyes darting back toward the hallway. "Your brother doesn't want you here. He says if you step foot inside, he's leaving for good, and you know Mom can't handle that." Those words were a guillotine. My brother Ethan was the golden child, the one who held the family's fragile peace together after our father passed. If he didn't want me, I didn't exist. I turned around, walked down those wooden steps, and didn't look back for 12 long years. I built a life out of scraps. I worked 3 jobs, put myself through school, and learned to find comfort in the silence. But as I sat down to eat a solitary dinner tonight, my doorbell rang. It wasn't a delivery. It wasn't a neighbor. It was a courier holding a heavy, cream-colored envelope. Before we dive deeper into what was inside that envelope and the secret that shattered my world, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from right now, and what time is it there? Let me know in the comments. I love reading where you all are. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten note. It wasn't from Sarah. It wasn't from my mother. It was a legal document regarding my brother's estate. And stapled to the back was a photo of a room I hadn't seen in a decade. A room that looked exactly like I had left it, as if someone had been waiting for me to walk through the door every single day. My heart hammered against my ribs. If Ethan hated me so much, why was my bedroom still a shrine? Why was his lawyer reaching out to me now? I realized then that the story Sarah told me on that porch wasn't just a warning, it was a cage, and it was time I found out who really held the key. I expected to find a space that reflected the man Sarah described, someone bitter, someone who held a decade-long grudge against his own sister. Instead, I pushed open the door to find something that stopped the breath in my lungs. Ethan's room was covered in maps. Not maps of the world, but maps of the city I had moved to. There were clippings of local newspapers from my neighborhood, wedding announcements where I had been a bridesmaid for friends, and even a printed photo of the cafe where I worked during my first year of college. He hadn't been avoiding me. He had been following me. He had been watching over me from a distance for 12 years. I turned to Sarah, who was standing in the doorway, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "He spent every penny he had trying to find you after you disappeared that night," she sobbed. "Disappeared?" I yelled, the anger finally breaking through. "I didn't disappear. You told me he kicked me out. You told me he couldn't stand the sight of me." Sarah collapsed onto the edge of Ethan's bed, burying her face in her hands. "I had to, Lily. Mom was losing her mind after Dad died. She was convinced that if you stayed, you'd take the inheritance and leave us with nothing. She made me do it. She made me lie to both of you." The room began to spin. My mother, the woman I thought was a victim of grief, had orchestrated a decade of isolation just to protect a bank account? But the realization that followed was even worse. If Ethan was looking for me, and Sarah was lying to me, then what happened to the letters I sent, the phone calls I tried to make in those first few months? I walked over to Ethan's desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. It wasn't empty. It was filled with hundreds of envelopes, all addressed to Ethan, all unopened, and all marked with a stamp that said, "Return to sender. Addressee refuses delivery." Except it wasn't Ethan's handwriting on those stamps. It was Sarah's. The sight of my own handwriting, years of it, staring back at me from a graveyard of envelopes, felt like a physical blow. I picked up a letter from 5 years ago. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded. I had written to Ethan when I got my first promotion, hoping he'd be proud. He never even saw it. "You did this," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I held up a bundle of the returned mail. "You didn't just lie once on that porch, Sarah. You woke up every single morning for 4,000 days and chose to keep us apart." Sarah reached out, her hands trembling, trying to touch the letters, but I pulled them back. "Mom was sick, Lily. She was obsessed with the house, the money. She thought you were the rebel who would sell everything and run. She told me if I didn't help her keep you away, she'd disinherit both of us and leave the house to a charity. I was scared. I was 22 and had nothing." "So you sold your sister for a roof over your head?" I spat the words out. I looked back at the maps on the wall. Ethan hadn't just been tracking me. He had been documenting my life like a guardian angel who wasn't allowed to speak. There were notes in the margins of the newspaper clippings. "Lily looks tired in this photo," one said, next to a grainy picture of me at a community marathon. "Hope she's eating well." The grief hit me then, not for the brother who was gone, but for the relationship we were robbed of. He died thinking I had abandoned the family, while I lived thinking he hated my soul. I walked past Sarah, heading toward my mother's room, at the front of the house. If she was the architect of this nightmare, I wanted to see the face of the woman who could trade her daughter's love for a piece of real estate. I slammed the door open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. My mother sat in her rocking chair by the window, a shawl draped over her thin shoulders. She didn't even turn around when I entered. "Sarah, is that you?" she asked, her voice thin and brittle, like dry leaves. "Did you tell that girl to leave yet?" I saw a car out front. "The girl has a name, Mother," I said, stepping into the light. She froze. The rocking chair stopped mid-motion. She slowly turned her head, her eyes squinting, as if looking at a ghost. There was no joy in her expression, no relief, only a cold, hard flicker of resentment. "You were always the one who caused trouble, Lily Rose," she muttered, turning back to the window. "Ethan was the anchor. You were the storm. I couldn't let you sink this family. Ethan is dead, Mom. The anchor is gone. And the only thing sinking this family is the mountain of lies you built." I walked over to her vanity and picked up a small, silver-framed photo of Ethan. Behind it, I noticed a small key taped to the wood. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a house key. It was a key to a safety deposit box at the local bank, the one Dad used to use. "What is this?" I demanded. My mother's face went pale. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Give that back. That's private. That's Ethan's legacy." "No," I said, closing my fist around the cold metal. I didn't wait for her to answer. I ignored her screams as I marched out of that room, the small silver. But they weren't for a physical illness. They were psychiatric evaluations from years ago, before I even left. The diagnosis was clear: a severe personality disorder characterized by manipulation and a pathological need for control. Ethan's voice continued, now trembling with emotion. "I spent my life protecting you by staying away. I stayed here to keep her focus on me, so she wouldn't hunt you down in the city. But I've been building a case. Inside this box is the evidence of the forgery, the evidence of the money she stole from your college fund, and the truth about Dad's life insurance." I froze. The life insurance? My father had died in a car accident when I was 15. We were told the policy had lapsed. "She didn't lose the money, Lily. She hid it. It's all in an account under your name that she's been using to pay Sarah's loyalty fee. Every time Sarah lied to you, she got a deposit. My sister sold you out for a monthly paycheck." I looked at the bank statements at the bottom of the box. Every month for 12 years, a transfer was made from an account in my name to Sarah's private savings. Sarah hadn't just been scared. She had been a ghost employee in my mother's twisted company of lies. I stood up, the recorder still playing in my hand. The anger was gone now, replaced by a cold, sharp blade of resolve. My 30th birthday was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it had turned into an interrogation. I walked out of that bank, the evidence tucked under my arm. I wasn't going back to my apartment. I was going back to that house on Elm Street. And this time, I wasn't going as a victim. The drive back to the house felt different this time. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the orange glow of the streetlights. I walked through the front door, but I didn't head for the stairs. I went straight to the kitchen, where Sarah and my mother were sitting in a heavy, suffocating silence. I laid the medical files, the bank statements, and the digital recorder on the table. The sound of the paper hitting the wood was like a gavel in a courtroom. "The monthly payments end tonight," I said, looking directly at Sarah. Her eyes darted to the bank statements, and her face drained of color. "And the forgery charges? Those are next." My mother tried to speak, her mouth opening like a landed fish, but I held up a hand. "You used my name to hide Dad's money. You used my sister's greed to keep me away, and you used Ethan's protection as a cage for him. But Ethan left me a gift." I pressed play on the recorder one last time. Ethan's voice filled the kitchen, the voice of the brother they thought they had silenced. "Lily, don't forgive them. Just take what belongs to you and never look back. Be the storm they were so afraid of." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply told them they had 24 hours to pack. The house was in my name, a final legal maneuver Ethan had completed just weeks before he passed. He hadn't just left me the truth, he had left me the keys to the kingdom they had tried to steal. As I watched them realize that their decade of manipulation had resulted in their own exile, I felt a strange sense of peace. I walked out onto the porch, the same porch where I had been turned away 12 years ago. I looked out at the horizon. I was Lily Rose. I was 30 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was finally home. Because home wasn't a building, it was the truth. Do you think Sarah deserves a second chance for being forced into the lies, or is she just as guilty as the mother? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You're watching Lily Calm's Stories, where the truth always finds its way home.